And it was not what we thought, like when we were planning it, we had obviously planned to have a home birth in a birth tub with our birth team. And, so like nothing went like we had, thought or planned, but it was so wild and so awesome and beautiful. I know that the moment that I was in bed holding the baby with my husband sitting beside me, and I'm just like in awe of what we just did and what we just went through. I could not have planned or imagined that it would be the way that it was.
Holy Wild Birth is a podcast embracing the reclamation of giving birth rooted in God's original design, undisturbed.
Here, we share home birth stories highlighting God's presence as the great midwife, as well as conversations about all aspects of a holistic, spirit-led childbearing year, from the perspectives of myself, traditional midwife Lauren Hall, of Rooted in Eden Private Membership Association,
and me, holistic birthkeeper and photographer Brooke Collier of Sister Birth. Together, we are co-founders and facilitators of Hearth Mother Journey, where we are raising up the next generation of holy wild birthkeepers.
To choose a holy wild birth journey is to consecrate all of your decisions unto the Lord and reclaim creation unadulterated by centuries of human attempts to control and improve upon what God has called good.
Please remember that birth is not a medical event, but a natural process, and we are not your care providers, so this should not be taken as medical advice. As we dive into today's birth story, just a reminder that the choices and beliefs of the mamas sharing their stories here are as individual and varied as the storyteller herself, and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or recommended actions of Lauren and or Brooke. All right. Hey, Holy Wild Birth listeners. I'm in the studio today. This is Brooke. I'm in the studio with Stephanie, and I was just so excited about her story. When she sent me an email telling me about her experience of birthing her 8th baby, I immediately thought, oh, I want to hear more. And she very graciously is, even in this fresh postpartum time, willing to get into the studio with me and tell me that story on record so that you also can hear it, Holy Wild Birth listeners. So anyway, Stephanie's here. And hi, Stephanie. Hi. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here.
Yay.
This is such a blessing.
I know it will be to the people who hear too. So will you first just introduce yourself to our listeners?
I'm Stephanie. I am been married for almost 17 years to my husband, which it always seems like a silly thing to say, but that's who it is. And had my first home birth, but with my 8th baby. So I have 8 kids. We have been homeschooling for this will be our 3rd full year homeschooling, which has been another blessing. And I'm just very excited.
Yeah, switching to homeschooling after that many years not doing it is a big change for you too.
It was, yes.
Yeah, okay, you're doing all the new things over there.
Yes.
The homeschooling and have my first home birth.
Yes.
I love it. Okay, yeah, good. So you said you have 8 children, which means, and this was your first home birth, which means the first 7 were not born at home. So do you want to at least kind of summarize for us like what your kind of journey into motherhood and those first 7 births was like? We'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So just to kind of like quickly as I can recap all of them.
Mm-hmm.
My first was actually an early miscarriage, which I just walked through with a friend who just had her first as a miscarriage. And actually there was an episode that I just listened to a podcast the day before I found out that she had a miscarriage. And it's something that I really struggled with and kept quiet about. And so I really was able to help and encourage her.
Yeah, right. I see your little one. Oh, so fun. I wish our listeners could see the cute babies that are sometimes on this podcast too. But Stephanie, my first was also an early loss. So it's a more common story than I think people realize. Yeah, and it's not a great way to enter motherhood.
That was one of the things that I told her, is that because she kind of kept quiet about it a little bit and didn't really feel like because it was so early that she should even like really talk about it. And it really affected me a lot. I went through major depression after that and lost my job. And on the less sad side of that, I always joke that it flipped a trigger in me, that I lost that first baby, and then I decided that then I was going to have all the babies because I had always been the one to not want kids. I was going to be the fun aunt.
Interesting.
But then I had that first miscarriage, which my husband and I had just gotten married, and we got pregnant almost right away, and we weren't ready. And then when we lost the baby, I was like, oh wow, that's a loss. Like, there's a hole there.
Wow.
But about 6 months later after that, we got pregnant with our first. And so then my subsequent after that, I was diagnosed with gestational diabetes with her. And so I was talked into induction at 39 weeks. And so I had Pitocin and epidural and all of the interventions. Then with number 2, I got pregnant again about 3 years later. And that one I did not have gestational diabetes. So they let me go past my due date, 40 weeks and 5 days. But then I was also talked into induction as well. And with number 3 was another gestational diabetes pregnancy. All of them have been diet controlled, which kind of like, every time it happened, I kind of wondered, like, why is it so easy for me to keep my blood pressure, my blood sugars under control, but I can't seem to pass that silly test. So with my third, I don't remember the reasoning, but they wanted to induce me at 38 weeks. So we did. And then with my fourth was another gestational diabetes pregnancy, but this time they wanted to induce me at 37 weeks. And this one I remember because the doctor, who I really liked the doctor, she was a wonderful lady, but she was going on vacation.
Oh, no.
She was going to be on vacation for 2 weeks. And so she was like, well, if you want me to deliver your baby, we're going to have to do it. And so,
wow.
You know, looking back, I have a lot of things that I would have done very, very differently with all of those. But, you know.
You probably just didn't know at that time the things that you now know.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's wildly different. But then pregnancy number 6 comes along. So pregnancy number 6 was supposed to be the tiebreaker, which is the joke, because we had 2 girls, then we had 2 boys, so we had 4, and number 5 was going to break the tie. Yep. And then we found out that we were pregnant with boy-girl twins.
No way.
And so we ended up with 2 more, one of each. But this time around, I had decided that I didn't want to do the gestational diabetes, or the glucose test. And so my doctor was like, okay, well, we don't have to do that, but I'm going to need you to check your blood sugars, which I had done with 3 of my 4 previous pregnancies a lot. So I was like, oh, I'll happily do that. Never once. My blood pressures were perfect. Or I keep saying
blood sugars.
My blood sugars were perfect the whole pregnancy. And so I think that my body just negatively reacts to that gross glucose drink and didn't handle it well. And so I would be failing it. So after that, and since then, I've never done that again and just monitored my blood sugars. And they've been fantastic. Never had another issue.
Definitely a superior way to handle that.
And I don't know, it just made so much more sense. But I had for a twin pregnancy, it was wonderful. I mean, I didn't have any issues. They were growing great. And until I hit 36 weeks, both the babies were like perpendicular transverse. And baby A, they thought might have had a growth restriction. And of course, at that time, like, again, looking back, he was fine, but they told me that it basically scared me into, if I didn't have a C-section that very day, that I could have 2 living babies or 2 unliving babies.
Oh, wow. What a thing to hear.
I mean, and it was, again, like, I feel like, at the time I trusted the doctor, and when they said it, it just was like, okay, I don't want to do anything wrong. And so that, I called my husband wasn't even with me at that appointment because it was 36 weeks. He was at work. We were not expecting the babies, anytime soon because everything was going fantastic. And so I called him and said, hey, they're taking me back for a C-section. Get here as quick as you can. And within less than 2 hours after that point, they were both born. And of course, baby A, which they were the one concerned about, He came out fantastic, breathing perfectly, no issues at all. Baby B, she came out with some breathing issues and had to be transferred to a higher NICU hospital, but only for 2 days.
So interesting. So they thought, we need to deliver these babies right now. Like, you don't even get to go home and like pack a bag. Like, right now we're taking you back because transverse and growth restriction. But then these babies came out, well, were either of them growth restricted, or was one significantly smaller than the other?
I wouldn't say that they were always, one was bigger than the other. Baby A was always slightly smaller, and there was about not quite a pound difference between the two of them.
Yeah.
He was not quite a pound smaller than she was, but it was kind of like that the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't like an extreme discrepancy like you would see with twin-to-twin transfusion. It doesn't sound like.
Yes, and that was one of the things that they were concerned with.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, he came out with he didn't have a single issue. He came out fantastic. She just needed oxygen that they didn't have available at that hospital. And as soon as they got her to that other hospital with the stronger oxygen, she was fantastic too.
Good.
The postpartum from that was very difficult physically and emotionally because, I wasn't ready for any of that. I'd never had a C-section before.
Yeah.
And so that was very, very difficult. Then come number 7, we got pregnant. We weren't trying, but we weren't doing our best to prevent it also. Haven't we all been there? She wasn't planned necessarily, air quotes, planned, but when she came, we were happy. And the whole time, my doctor, the same doctor I had had for my previous 4 pregnancies, was always on board. She's like, you're a fantastic candidate for a VBAC. There's no, it's going to be awesome. We're going to do this. And again, I had no issues with my pregnancy, no gestational diabetes, nothing. But then 36 weeks hit, and actually, it was a lot of things at that same time. My grandmother had just passed away, and it was a big deal because it put a lot of pressure on specifically my mom, who then kind of, a lot of those feelings kind of fell on me as the oldest daughter. Yeah. And then they asked me to sing at my grandmother's funeral. And again, I was 36 weeks pregnant. That's hard to sing when you're that pregnant, like physically. Yes. And I wanted to do it to honor my grandmother, and I knew that my family would appreciate it. But I had a doctor's appointment that day. So I went into the doctor's appointment, and my blood pressure was elevated. And looking back, now, of course my blood pressure was elevated. I was under so much stress during that time that it makes sense. And so again, with the fear, which I think is a theme that ran through all of my pregnancies, is just that they know better than I do. And so that fear of, well, if we can't get your blood pressure down and under control, then you're going to have a C-section, which just, I then spent that weekend, because they did let me go, because I told them, I have to get to my grandmother's funeral. I have to go. And I never felt any worry or concern that my baby was in danger, or that I myself was in danger. I didn't have any of the other symptoms with high blood pressure, like vision issues or feeling like my blood pressure. It was just stress. Yeah, so it was just creeping up a little bit, probably because of stress. And did they run labs? Did they do the lab profile? They did that it was a Friday. They didn't do blood work then. They tested and I had some protein in my urine, I think is one of the things that they said. Okay. But they didn't do blood work at that moment. They did send me for a non-stress test, which we passed and was fine. But again, made me almost miss my grandmother's funeral at that point. Oh my word. The appointment was early in the morning, but everything that they did pushed it back. But then they were like, well, you have to come back in on Monday. And if your blood pressure is still elevated, then you're going to have a C-section. So I go in, I go in that Monday, and I'm so scared of having another C-section because of how awful it was the first time around, that I knew my blood pressure was going to be elevated and there was nothing that I could do. And essentially the doctor told me, because that was another thing, is I wasn't going to have the baby. So I didn't have a bag packed or anything. And I said, could I at least go home and get my stuff? Like, at least let me go home and get my hospital bag, and then I'll come back in later today. And she said to me, well, if I let you go home, what if you have a seizure and die? And at that,
Goodness gracious. How high was it?
I mean, so at that moment, it was creeping up. I knew it was, but it was like 150 over maybe 90. I mean, it was high, but I was also so scared.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense why that would be high. Yeah.
And, everything that they were saying was just making me more scared.
Mm-hmm.
And so she walks out of the room, and my husband and I just like look at each other like this is the last thing we wanted. I said from the moment I found out I was pregnant, I was not going to have another C-section, that we were going to have a VBAC, and it was going to be a natural, like I wanted to have a natural, hospital birth this time around. And I had done so much, not as much research as I wish I would have, but I'd done a lot of research on how to have a natural birth in a hospital setting, and what things you need to do to really advocate for yourself. And in that moment, it was like everything just left my brain. Mm-hmm. All that fear just was like, okay. And the next thing I know, we're being, again, wheeled right over. She was born in like 45 minutes from that moment.
That's so jarring.
The physical recovery from that C-section was night and day different from the twins. I physically felt so much better afterwards.
That's good.
But the emotional recovery, it was so incredibly traumatic. Mm-hmm. I did not recover from that. I mean, honestly, I don't think I recovered from that until baby number 8 was born.
Mm-hmm. If it's okay, can I ask, why do you think that second one landed emotionally in such a so much more of a difficult, traumatic way than your last C-section with the twins?
I think that it was harder because I had spent the entire pregnancy kind of hyping myself up for a VBAC. And having had it taken away from the twins, it was almost like my brain was like, I get that. It was twins. They were transverse. Like,
sure.
Like it kind of made, like, I didn't want to have a C-section at all. Obviously, like, nobody wants to have major abdominal surgery and all the recovery that entails with that. But I could kind of talk myself into it. But then with my 7th, it felt like it was ripped away from me. It felt like I didn't get to make the choice. That everything was done to me, and that even though everything ended up well, a healthy mom, healthy baby at the end of it, that it was just so much harder to mentally deal with, because I had spent, like I said, the whole pregnancy just really preparing myself for what was going to be my VBAC, what was going to be my redemptive birth. After having the C-section with the twins, she was going to be my redemption, and it's going to make everything feel better.
Yep. That makes so much sense.
And it didn't come. And so that then brings us to the shock of baby number 8. We were trying very much not to get pregnant. We used natural family planning, and I was doing everything. I was tracking every symptom, my temp. We were using barrier methods when we were even close to our fertile window. I mean, everything that you could possibly do to not get pregnant. And then the pregnancy test comes at 7 months postpartum. And
oh, goodness.
Yes. I mean, and to say that I was shocked would be an understatement. I was in absolute denial. And that's why I said I don't think that I really recovered from my second C-section until my 8th was born, because I didn't really have time, for one, to do a lot of recovery, physically or emotionally, because it happened so quickly. And truthfully, when I found out that I was pregnant, there was a lot of bitterness and anger. I mean, I am a Bible-believing Christian, and, I have been that way for the majority of my adult life. I walked away from the Lord a little bit when I was in college, but for the majority of my life, I've leaned on the Lord. And that pregnancy came in such a way that I was mad.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be pregnant, and I wasn't ready for another baby. And the fear, because the hospital that I would have had to deliver at had I gone with a hospital, they won't even allow 2-time C-sections to try for labor. And
So they won't do a trial of labor. For our listeners who might not know, some hospitals have a policy where in certain circumstances they'll let a previous C-section mom have what's called a trial of labor. Like, we'll let you try, but we're probably going to end up in surgery. It's kind of the attitude that seems to come with it, right? Yeah. But you're saying at this hospital, they had a policy that if you've had 2 cesareans, you're not even allowed that trial of labor.
Yes.
Okay.
When I found out that I was pregnant, and actually, that to go back to my second C-section, the doctor she is a friend. I would say that she's a friend from church. We know each other from church. But she came in after the baby was born, and she was just telling me how well it went, how well the C-section went, and how everything looked really good. And she was like, I think that you could definitely do another C-section. You could definitely have another baby if you ever wanted to. And I was like, it was kind of like a shock to my system. Like, why would I intend on having another C-section? And that's when I found out at that point is that their policy is that you can't even try. If you've had 2 C-sections, you will automatically have to have a third C-section.
Gotcha. So then when you're pregnant again, then you probably have this thought of, I don't even have a chance at that redemptive birth anymore.
Yes.
Like, because they won't let me try to have a vaginal birth.
And so at that point, it took me, I would say I was probably 15 or 16 weeks to really process that pregnancy. I didn't have, with all of even with my 7th, which one was still a surprise, there was joy from the beginning. And, we were excited. And, even if we were shocked, we were still excited. But I truthfully, and some guilt that I have to deal with this honesty, but it took me at least 15 or 16 weeks to kind of work through my anger and to really come to terms with, okay, I'm pregnant again. We're having another baby.
Yeah.
And so once I got to that point, I just decided, okay, well, if this is God's plan, then he's going to orchestrate it and I'm going to give it over to him. And he knows the desires of my heart. He knows the struggle that I've been through with especially my last 2 pregnancies. And I don't believe, I had to get to a place where I said, I don't believe that he would allow me to go through that again. Because there were multiple times where I had discussions with one of my dear friends and with my husband that I didn't know how I could handle. And I don't mean physically, but like emotionally, spiritually handle another C-section. And so working through that, I finally decided, well, obviously the only option that I have is a home birth. And so at 15 weeks, and I had looked a little bit into home birth with my 7th baby, but I scared myself out of it.
Oh yeah, okay.
Thought it sounds beautiful, but I would do it with the next one. I'll have my VBAC this time, and then if I ever got pregnant again, then I would have a home birth maybe.
Sure.
So I just kind of like tricked my brain and scared myself out of even thinking that I could have a home birth after a C-section.
But now here you are, and you can't have the VBAC at the hospital, so it reopened you to the possibility of the home birth option.
And that's what I told my husband. I said, this is our only option. And I honestly thought, like, because I had mentioned it, just offhandedly before with the previous pregnancy, and he was completely, no way, absolutely not. There's no way we could do that. So when I brought it up with my most recent baby, and he was just instantly on board.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't question it. He was like, obviously, like, that's just what we have to do.
Let's
figure it out. And I think that I don't know if there's much, I don't know if many people talk about it, but I think he had some trauma and some birth issues that he had to deal with as well, because both of our C-sections came at such a shock to him. He's not a planner in that, like, he wants to lay out plans, but when things don't go the way he thinks they're going to go, it's really hard for him. So with those 2 unexpected C-sections, it was really, really difficult for him. And then I think also to see me go through the physical recovery was also very difficult. And so I think sometimes men in those situations kind of get pushed to the side a little bit.
Or just forgotten, right?
Yeah.
Like, just people don't notice that they're also struggling.
And, you know, we think about the mom who physically went through it, but the dad was also there too. And so I think that was what pushed him. He was, like I said, the second I came to terms with the pregnancy and started talking about home birth, he was right on board. And so I started looking for midwives.
Let me pause you for just a minute to hold up a mirror to something you said that I just think is beautiful. First of all, I really appreciate you being so real about that disappointment and the, like, I don't want this. I think that's one of those things that can be taboo that people feel embarrassed or ashamed to say out loud. So I just really deeply appreciate you saying it out loud because it's something that happens. It's very real. And I know lots of people listening to this will be able to relate to that. So thank you for being real about that. I just am struck by how you just let yourself have those feelings and just take as long as you needed. And then you got to that place of acceptance, which turned into surrender to the Lord, this is in your hands. This has to be yours. I'm just giving that over to him and just kind of throwing yourself on his goodness. Like, I'm going to believe you for better, right? I'm going to believe you for something better. And then I think it's just really neat and interesting how then when you started asking your husband about home birth, even though you probably didn't have a lot of reason to think he would suddenly be cool with it, he just was, which feels to me like the first sign of God hearing you and responding to your surrender, right? Amen. I got you. So it's really cool. Anyway, carry on. So you started looking for a midwife?
It was a little bit more difficult than I anticipated because I had gotten turned down by a couple anyway, because I had 2 previous C-sections. And
I see.
You know, whether they were licensing issues or just they didn't feel comfortable with it. And then it was later on in my pregnancy when I started looking, because I know that a lot of midwives tend to book up really fast. I mean, women are like reaching out as soon as they get that positive pregnancy test to get on the books, which I didn't know, at the time, obviously. And so then I finally came across one, and she had some availability with a minor, like where my due date was going to fall. She had one little minor issue with if I were to go late, which does come into play at the end of my pregnancy a little bit. But she had a lot of success with VBACs and even 2-time VBACs. And so she just was like, I met her on, a Zoom meeting, and we chatted, and she was wonderful.
Awesome.
She had a team of her and another midwife, and then they had 2 students, and I was able to get in, but I didn't even start my care with them until I was 19 weeks. So I made it almost the whole first half of pregnancy with nothing. And again, it was like, it was so, man, I'm like, I went from never having this to, I can't imagine every woman in the world not having this. It was so beautiful and freeing. Just to
the prenatal care.
And like to not have to worry about all the doctor visits and all of the things that I have to go to. So that like first 19 weeks of not doing anything, like I had a pregnancy test. That was all I had. And it was wonderful. Like, I had the time to work through my feelings of anger and disappointment. And it wasn't like pushed in my face every time, okay, here we go. And we have to do another appointment. Here we go. And we have to do another thing. And so I think that was one of the things that really gave me the opportunity to work through the feelings that I was having, because I didn't have to have it pushed in my face when I wasn't ready. I could kind of push it aside for, when I needed to be able to focus on my other 7 kids and homeschooling and that kind of thing. But then when I had the time, I could sit down and work through it and process it. And so that was actually really, really wonderful. And then when
Seems like another example of God's providence of just arranging that for you, like he knew you needed that.
I mean, it was wonderful. And then to go the way that, I mean, specifically my midwife, I know everyone's differently, but the way that midwifery care differs from hospital care is just outstanding. The first appointment, and it's so funny because I told them this so many times, but they wouldn't even touch me without asking if it was okay. They wouldn't take my temperature or my blood pressure, like, hey, is it okay? And it was really funny because like I said, there were 2 student midwives, and so they would also be at some of my appointments. And like, for example, if I got up on the exam table that they have and they were going to measure my fundal height, all 4 of them would come up and each one would say, is it okay now? Is it okay if I do it now? Is it okay if, and I mean,
Awesome.
you walk into a doctor's office and you don't even know what they're doing. They just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just in and out so quickly and they just got to get their stuff done. And so it was so lovely to have a relationship and to feel like they were like really thoughtfully caring for me throughout my whole pregnancy.
As a whole person, right?
Yeah.
Not just like a woman like on a conveyor belt moving through the system.
Yes, absolutely. And so it was beautiful. Also, they never once made me get on a scale.
Oh, I love that. That's important for me too.
It was just one of those things. Like, it's a silly little thing that really made me feel more comfortable. I didn't ever have to worry about that silly scale. I'm somebody who's struggled with my weight throughout a lot of my adulthood, and so like to know that wasn't something that they were going to worry about. If I wanted to get weighed, they would. But if I didn't, want to, they didn't force me. It was fine. And so my prenatal care was fantastic. And that was about the same time that I don't even know how I found it. I honestly can't remember, but that was about the time that I stumbled upon the Embrace Birth Journey course, because the midwife said, I know you've had some vaginal deliveries before, but I really would like for you to go through and do a natural childbirth course. And so I don't know if it was just from searching, or I know that I was listening to some birth podcasts, some natural birth podcasts. And so I probably heard you on someone else's podcast.
Could be.
And I looked into the Embrace Birth Journey, and it was exactly what I was looking for. I needed something that, first and foremost, was Christian, because there's so much with the natural birth world that is so, I don't know, woo-woo and specifically secular, that I just really wanted something that would be grounded in the Lord. And I needed something that I could do on my own time, at my own pace. When I found that, it was just another, God thing, because it was exactly what I needed. It was exactly what I was looking for. And even, having had this be my 8th baby, there was still stuff that I learned, and it was so beautiful. I now have a dear friend who's going through the Hearth Mother journey, and so we talked a lot about it, and
I didn't realize that. That's a neat connection.
Yes, I'm so excited. She's also pregnant now with her 7th, but yeah, so it was just exactly what I needed, and I got it exactly when I needed it, and so it was so wonderful.
Plus,
and so my prenatal care went fantastic. Again, no gestational diabetes diagnosis. They had put me on some protocols to make sure that my blood pressure stayed at a good place. Lots of protein. I was doing reishi mushrooms like daily, and I think that really helped. I would only ever have slightly elevated blood pressures, but I think that part of that was when I would go to their office. It's about an hour and a half away, and I don't love driving. But it was never anything that they were concerned about. And I was checking my blood pressures at home to make sure that everything was normal. And it was fantastic every time I took my blood pressure at home. So I had no complications. The only, I would say, hiccup that we had was at 37 weeks, almost 37 weeks. I had an anterior placenta, which I found out I did a 20-week anatomy scan, and that's when I found that out. But because of that, and I have kind of a narrow torso, so baby kind of gets squished up, they were concerned that she might have been breached, and they would have delivered a breech baby, but obviously, that's not ideal. So they said that if I wanted to, I could go in and get an ultrasound to make sure that baby was in the right position. And then also I was doing some inversions daily and a few other things to try and help get her to make sure that she was in the proper position. But now looking back, I absolutely regret getting that ultrasound, because I went in to our local hospital and I was not on the OB floor. I was just in the outpatient ultrasound, and a student did my ultrasound, which I never had a problem. I have a lot of medical family, so I know that everybody has to learn. And so I've never, I was like, oh yeah, student midwives, that's great. They've got to learn how to do all the things. I don't have any problems with that. A student ultrasound tech, she's got to learn how to do it. Well, when she was measuring me, again, I was at 36 or 37 weeks. I think it was almost 37 weeks. Had her teacher standing behind her, but the teacher never did anything. She just kind of like looked over her shoulder. And they asked me if I typically had small babies, which I do. My biggest baby was 7.5 pounds. And then obviously my last two came early, so they were 5 and 6 pounds. And so, yeah, I do typically have smaller babies. I'm like, okay, well, this one seems to be kind of small. And that was basically all they said. Well, apparently the student measured the baby to be significantly small. And they diagnosed the baby with a growth restriction and didn't say anything to me at the time, but sent the report to my midwife, who then called me and said, hey, they're saying that the baby is measuring only 4 pounds, and that's, we can't legally deliver the baby unless they're at least, I can't remember, 6 pounds maybe, or she could lose her license. And so we have to get rid of, we can't deliver you with a growth restriction, with the IUGR diagnosis.
Okay, a couple things so interesting about that is that it's well known that the technology that they use to estimate the weight is wildly wrong a great percentage of the time, by a pound or more. And so they have rules in the license in your state about a midwife can't knowingly deliver a baby who's measuring small.
Yes.
Even though the tool used to assess whether or not a baby is small is unreliable.
If the baby were diagnosed with IUGR, then legally she could lose her license. Now, obviously, it's not set because they might not find out. But if someone were to find out, she could legally lose her license. But the worst part about it was that, of course, that sent me into a full panic because now my dreams of this beautiful home birth are being ripped away from me. And so we went through a lot of hullabaloo and ended up at a maternal fetal medicine doctor getting another ultrasound, which I didn't want the first one in the first place. And so again, I, looking back, would have declined that one.
Yeah.
But so this was 2 days later, and they said that the baby was measuring around 4 pounds at the first ultrasound, the one that was the student doing it. We get in there, and the first thing that they measure, and I was 36 or 37 weeks, and the baby was measuring 33 weeks, according to the first ultrasound. And so we get in, and the ultrasound tech, and the first thing that she measures is the baby's abdomen. And it measured exactly 37 weeks. And I saw it, and instantly. And when all was said and done, she's like, oh, the baby's at least 6 pounds. And so everything that was completely for nothing. It was
wow. I'm so glad you got a second opinion, but the fact that you had to live in that fear and panic for that long while you waited to get that information is just so unfortunate.
And I left a complaint. And again, I was never angry with the student because they're just learning. And, but I was definitely very upset with the whole situation because everything that happened didn't need to happen. If the teacher, the ultrasound tech, if they would have stepped in and double checked the measurements, things could have been differently.
It seems like that should be standard, honestly, with a student.
And especially with their concerns. And again, they never said anything in my initial appointment about the baby potentially having a growth restriction. They just said, well, this one definitely seems like it's small. And then they left me with no information. And so if they thought that that was the case, the fact that she didn't step in and remeasure to double check, was just, so I left a complaint, and I'm not one to leave complaints. But I left a complaint just stating that, the panic that put us in. And so it was crazy, but thank the Lord, that was the only real hiccup that we had with this whole pregnancy. We got past that and then continued on for another several weeks. So the one caveat that my midwife had was that her son was getting married at like mid-June. And, she said that, she couldn't miss that. And family is first, and that's a big deal. Your son getting married is a big deal. And so that was something that I had consented to at the beginning, at the very outset. She was like, I will happily take you. My due date was June 4th. And he wasn't getting married until like the third week of June or something like that. Now I can't remember. But I was like, I will definitely have had the baby, because that would have put me at, over 42 weeks. And, I've never had a natural labor before. So, but it was just something I didn't even worry about until, I got to 40 weeks and was still pregnant. And then we get to 41 weeks and still pregnant.
What is this whole 41 weeks thing? I've never been here before.
And it was so crazy, because it's just like, I'm okay. Every morning I wake up, I'm like, well, I guess we're still doing this one more day. And we just kept going one more day at a time. And the shocked looks that you get from people when you say, oh yeah, my due date was a week and a half ago. What? How can that be possible?
Like, how are you allowed to walk around pregnant still? Why haven't they taken your baby out yet?
Yeah, like it was against the law to go past your due date. It was very funny. That was probably one of my favorite things. Like one of the things that gave me a giggle at the end of pregnancy, when you're super pregnant and you're kind of a little bit miserable. And so just to be like, oh yeah, I was due a week and a half. I was due 12 days ago. So we were actually coming up on the week of the wedding. And I had found out several weeks earlier that not only was my midwife it was her son, but her second midwife was a bridesmaid. And the two student midwives were going to be attending the wedding.
Oh, you're kidding.
It was the entire team that would be gone that following weekend. And so I didn't tell a soul. The only person who knew about that was my husband, because specifically I knew my mom, who was a former OB nurse, would freak out
if she thought you didn't have like at least a midwife covering you.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
And so that brings us to, so I was 41 weeks and 5 days, and it was a Sunday night. And for some reason, I just was not tired that night. I felt really amped that evening. And so I was like kind of like running around, like doing stuff. And we had gotten the kids to bed several hours before that. And it was about 11 o'clock. And I just got into my head, I'm like, I'm going to try the midwives brew. I just happened to have most of the stuff anyway. And so I threw together, I had the stuff from previous, but I was just a little wary of the castor oil.
Yeah.
You hear like...
Which you hear me talk about in Embrace Birth Journey too, right?
Yes. And
do not recommend.
You hear this scary stuff. And so I was like, okay, I had it because of, other reasons. I had just had some. And I was just like, okay, well, I'll just try it, but I'll just put a tiny bit of castor oil in. Because I was also afraid it would taste gross. Like the last thing you really want to do when you're pregnant is eat something gross. So I had made it, with the tea and the juice, and I just put in, I don't even remember, I think it was like the recipe I found said 2 tablespoons or something, and I think that's right. Yeah, I put in like a teaspoon maybe in because I was like, maybe this will just help, like, yeah, if I'm not going to go into labor, they won't do anything, but maybe it'll help. And so I had made that. I had a big bowl of fresh pineapple, and I was on my exercise like bounce ball. And I just kind of sat and drank that and ate some pineapple. And I was actually rewatching some of the Embrace Birth Journey courses.
That's awesome.
Just, again, because I wasn't tired too. And then at about 11:30, all of our kids were asleep. And so I made my husband take me out and walk around our block for a good 20 minutes or so. And then we come back in, and he went to bed and just slept. And I couldn't. I laid in bed for a while and just couldn't fall asleep. I was just really... And then 1:33 was my first contraction. And looking back now, I realized that it's different, but it was so different than I remembered my contractions being from my 4 vaginal deliveries, which were almost 7 years ago. My last my last vaginal delivery. He's almost 7 now. So, but it was in such a very localized spot, just in the front. And I remember my contractions being, the whole of my abdomen and back, and all of my middle section contracting and being painful. But this one was just right in the front. And so I thought, oh no, this is just the castor oil. And that's all it is. It's just going to make me feel uncomfortable. And then I'm not really in labor. And so I convinced myself that those contractions were not real contractions. And they never got consistent either.
Mm-hmm.
At time, I don't know, you kind of envision never having had a natural labor, you just imagine that, okay, they're going to be 10 minutes apart, and then they're going to be 8 minutes apart, and then they're going to get closer and closer and closer.
Not always.
And it didn't. It would be 7 minutes, and then it would be every 2 minutes, and then it would go back to 5 minutes, and then it would be 10 minutes. And so I had convinced myself for a good 45 minutes of laying in bed that this was not real. Instinctually, I started timing them from that first one, which should have been my first clue. I knew right then and there that it was, but I just tricked myself into thinking. So I'd gotten out of bed because I didn't want to bother my husband, and I was sitting in the living room, and I did that for probably a half an hour before I got lonely. And so I woke him up and made him come sit with me. And then another probably half hour or so, I said, maybe we should put the birth tub. And he's like, are you going to call the midwife? Well, no, they're an hour and a half away. I don't want to call them and me be in fake labor. And I don't want to bother them, which again was so silly.
I just feel like I need to insert a PSA here for anyone who's listening. Every woman who has a home birth feels that way and gets worried about bothering the midwife or the doula or whoever is the birth worker. And we just want you to know, listeners, it is literally our job,
right?
To be bothered by you. It's okay. Even if you're wrong, call us. It's okay. If you want to call us, you don't have to. If you want to, don't be worried about it. Okay, and carry on.
So he starts to try to set up the birth tub, which we had gone over it and everything. We knew what we were doing, so we thought. But we're when it comes to building things, think like IKEA furniture, where we teamwork it. And so I'm reading the instructions and he's doing the work. But I was not being very helpful in that I was working through contractions every time.
Right.
And so he's trying to figure it out while I'm going through contractions. And he's trying to comfort me and put the birth tub together. And when we finally got the birth tub together, I had texted my midwife. And I had said, okay, I think maybe now would be a good time. This point it was now probably about 4 a.m. So the first contraction was at 1:30, and this is now about 4 a.m. So about 2.5 hours later, I finally said, okay, probably you guys could probably head this way. We're getting the birth tub set up, and things are probably going to get, moving along. I was very wrong. Things were not just going to be moving along. He finally got the birth tub set up, and then I actually felt really bad for him because I could tell how much he wanted to do it, and he couldn't. What's the matter now?
The birth pool was not cooperating with your husband, huh?
It was not. And at one point, I snapped at him, and I realized that I snapped at him because he was doing something wrong. He was putting a piece on wrong, and I snapped at him and told him that he was putting the piece on wrong. And then I instantly felt super guilty because I realized that was not me. That was contractions talking.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm sorry, babe. I didn't mean to yell at you. And he finally got it all put together. Went to put the hose in to fill it. And the hose, which we had actually practiced the hose to make sure that it would work, to make sure that it would reach. And he put it in, turned the water on, and from behind the sink, not even from the hose, it just started spraying water all over our bathroom. It was absolutely, and so he turns it off, and we're like, what are we going to do now? My midwife is getting together and, going to be heading that way. But again, they're an hour and a half minimum away. And at 4:43 was the time the last contraction that I timed. because that contraction did not stop. And it was, contractions, they go up and then they come down, and then you might get a minute and then they go back up. And this one, it started at 4:43 and didn't stop until she was born.
Oh my, which was about how long?
20 minutes.
What?
It would
Interesting.
Go up, and it would start to come down, and then it would go right back up, and it would start to come down. And so at that point, I'm like, we're done with the birth tub. It's not happening. Maybe we can make it to the bathtub. And so he kind of helps me waddle my way back to our main bathroom. And the toilet and the tub are right next to each other. And so I said, I'm going to sit here on the toilet while you turn on the bathtub, only to realize that I'd left my phone in the other room, and I wanted to call the midwife. So he goes running into the living room to grab my cell phone so that we can call the midwife and at least have her on the phone. And as he comes running back around the corner, I'm shouting, "The baby's coming. You have to catch it." We didn't know if it was a boy or a girl at this point. Like a side note of all of this, one of my big fears or concerns, I won't say it's a fear, but one of my concerns was that my husband is not one that deals with blood. He had almost passed out at a couple of my previous labors because he just does not handle blood. And so I had, that was always there. Sometimes there's blood, and how would he handle that at home? And so he comes sprinting around the corner, and I'm shouting at him that the baby is coming. And I just have to say, I've never felt it before like that. And it was at the same time the most painful and the most exhilarating feeling of just, this is what my body was made to do. Having had Pitocin and then an epidural and just very coached pushing. Like, okay, now you're going to push this, we're watching this go up. Now you push, as opposed to, I did not push at all. She just came out, and it was the most crazy, primal, amazing thing that my body just knew what to do. I didn't need somebody telling me when to push. I didn't need to push at all. I mean, she just came out, and my husband just leapt into action. He didn't need me to say it twice. He just reached and scooped her out. The second she came out crying and beautiful and, amazing color. And the second that he picked her up, put her right up on my stomach, she was breathing, and it was the most amazingly miraculous feeling ever. The 2 minutes after she was born, he calls the midwife and gets her on the phone. She is currently driving to us and says, "Okay, well, the baby was born." She says, "Okay, how is everybody?" "I think we're good." And then while we're on the phone, 2 minutes after we get on the phone with her, my placenta just comes out. It just delivers itself
easy peasy,
like nothing. And I to the point that I was like, "Oh my gosh, was that my placenta?" And holy cow. And that was another thing, is that the midwife was like, "Okay, I know this is gross, but I need you to reach in the toilet and fish it out." And I thought, there's no way. And again, without even thinking about it, my husband just reaches in and pulls it out.
Yeah. Look at him go.
And it was amazing. And he didn't even think, he just did it. And it was wild.
Wow, that's so good. I'm just struck by you're having this experience of primal, this is what I was made to do as a woman, and simultaneously he is being activated to honestly, in this really same primal way, do his part, just action and rise. He stepped up, he rose to the occasion, he did what needed done to take care of his wife. I think that's so beautiful. And
it was. And so we kind of just sat there for a minute, and then she says, "Okay, well, if you can make it to the bed, you'll be more comfortable." And so again, he helped kind of scoop me up, and we made our way over to the bed, and then we just laid in our own bed, in our own home, holding the baby that we just birthed on our own. And, it was the kind of thing that he had teased. He had joked with me from the get-go. Well, if we can't find a midwife, or if, when we had that scare with the IUGR, if they can't deliver the baby, then I'll just do it. And, not knowing all along that maybe that was God's plan to begin with, is that we would just do it ourselves.
I love that so much.
And so it was exactly 3.5 hours from the time of my first contraction to her being born. And it was amazing. One thing that I had said from finding out that when we decided we were going to have a home birth is that my ideal, which God's plan, is always the thing, is God's plan is better. God's plan is perfect. Our plan is fine, and we can make plans, but God's plan is perfect. But I had always kind of like teased, like, okay, God, if we could just have the baby in a time frame that I go into labor and the kids are all of our other kids are home in bed, and then they just wake up to a new sibling.
Yes, that's the ideal.
I don't have to worry about anybody, like going to grandma's house or being, kind of a little bit scared, and it was always like, I know that's silly. That's a silly thing to ask for. And then God gave it to us. And I was like, I just laid in bed. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's exactly what just happened is exactly what I had asked God for the whole time. And
so good.
He just gave it to us, because I had even thought that night after I had done the midwife's brew and like nothing happened. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to go to bed and wake up pregnant again tomorrow and it's fine. And then he just gave exactly what I asked for.
He's so good.
Baby. So I had just listened to your podcast episode on precipitous labors. I think it might, if it wasn't the day before, it was 2 days before. And my labor was, like I said, exactly 3.5 hours. And so as soon as it was over and the midwife had left, I Googled what is technically considered a precipitous birth because I couldn't remember the exact time frame. Like, how did I make it? Did I make the cut for precipitous labor? Because I really had just listened to that podcast and it was so fascinating to hear those other women's stories. And so I'm just going to give it because I think Google said anywhere between 3 and 5 hours or something like that. So
yeah,
I'm just going to give it to myself. Like,
I think you deserve that title for sure. And it is really interesting that you happened to listen to it was Lauren and our friend Jacqueline talking there about their precipitous births. And I love that you had those stories in your mind as you were having your own precipitous birth, because I think they did a good job painting that in a positive light. Like, it's intense, but also really can be peaceful. And
that's exactly like the word that I would use. It was intense, but wonderful.
Mm-hmm. That's so beautiful. Everything about that's so beautiful. I'm so happy for you. Talk about the redemptive birth that you were hoping for.
I mean,
you got it.
It was more, and it was not what we thought. Like when we were planning it, we had obviously planned to have a home birth in a birth tub with our birth team, and so like nothing went like we had thought or planned. But it was so wild and so awesome and beautiful. I know that the moment that I was in bed holding the baby with my husband sitting beside me, I could see he went from being so hyped to like he was about ready to fall asleep. And I'm just like in awe of what we just did and what we just went through. I could not have planned or imagined that it would be the way that it was. And I mean, the midwife didn't even get there. She got there about an hour after the birth. And even that, like, she came in just like a little tornado and just did all of the things. I mean, she did all, like the things that you think about, like checking our vitals and making sure that everything came out. But then she was like making sure that I had food and water and cleaning up like messes in our bathroom and off, the floor. And getting the most amazing like herbal bath like set up that I could take when I was ready for. Oh, it was so amazing. It was so spectacular. And she kept apologizing for missing it, and I kept apologizing for not telling her.
It sounds like it couldn't have been changed. Like she couldn't have made it.
No.
With the amount of information she had at the time that she had it, she couldn't have made it on time. And neither of you knew that. Yeah, sometimes that just happens, But I love that she still came and just really cared for you and cleaned up your space right after the birth. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Good.
She was wonderful, and we love them so much. It was such a good experience. I would, as crazy as I feel, exactly 3 weeks postpartum, I feel like I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Yes. I like to say that's the danger of a great home birth, is it makes you want to do it again and again and again. So you're experiencing that right now.
Yes.
I'm so glad you feel that way. That doesn't mean you need to go do it again tomorrow, but it just means it's just such a testimony to the fact that you really had a great birth.
Yes.
Yeah. So good, Stephanie. That's so good. Wow. And you're exactly 3 weeks postpartum right now. And how has postpartum been so far? How are you feeling?
I really struggled to stay in bed the first week. I wanted to try and really stay as vertical as possible.
Horizontal, you mean?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, horizontal. Yes, laying down. Yes, in bed. I really wanted to try and at least get a week, and I did pretty good. I think that I could have used longer.
Yeah.
But I also felt really pulled to get out and get to my other 7 kids. My husband is very much a like do his job kind of guy, and so for him to come home, I don't know, he's just a guy, and so there were things that I think guys have well, not all guys, but I think certain guys have man vision, and so things that mom would do maybe don't get done because he doesn't see them.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a real thing.
I didn't notice that pile of clothes that needed folded. It's been sitting there, or little things like that. And definitely one thing that I regret, but I wish I could have done a better job of is, and I just kept putting it off, I think, and I don't know why, but I didn't prepare a lot of meals for postpartum, and I do kind of, I hate saying regret, but I do wish that I would have had some more things that he could easily cook, because that was one of the things that really felt like I needed to get out of bed and do, because he's just, he's got his very set repertoire of, he can grill burgers, and he's very good at grilling burgers, and he can make lunch meat sandwiches, and that's where he is in his culinary skills, which are great. So I really felt like I needed to get out of bed to cook, and so I think that's one thing that I would do differently if I had another opportunity, is making sure that I had just some frozen things that I had cooked ahead of time that he could just heat up so that they would have meals and I wouldn't feel like I needed to get up to cook. And
sure. And yet the irony is it's also very difficult to do that freezer meal preparation when you have 7 children. So it's like either way it's going to be hard to do and spend energy that you're short on. But yeah, did you guys have a meal train or anything set up?
We did. We had a couple of wonderful friends bring us things. So we did have a few meals brought to us, which was such a blessing.
Good. Yeah, I recently became aware of something I wish I had known about in my own postpartum times, of this company that delivers through mail these amazing postpartum meals that are ancestral whole foods, yumminess. They look so good that I've been tempted to just order them for fun.
Yeah.
I haven't yet, but I'm like, oh, that's such a needed service.
You could give your first-hand review of them.
If I just ordered them for fun. They actually recently started a new line for birth workers, so that birth workers can order meals. I know, I thought it really was genius. So who knows? I might end up doing that at some point. I think it's really neat. Anyway. Yeah, so postpartum and staying in bed, you said that was a little hard to do, partly because of the need to get up and cook, but also when you're feeling good physically, which it seems like you are, right? Yes. It can be hard to want to stay put. when you feel pretty good.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
there's some births where you're like, oh, I need to rest because I feel it. And then other births where it's like, I feel amazing. Why would I stay in bed?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, good. Well, you seem good. You seem bright and present and kind of still a little bit high
Yeah.
on your birth, which is as it should be. I'm glad for that for you. So good. Well, okay, let me ask you this, Stephanie. Is there anything that you, and I'm putting you on the spot here, but what comes to mind for you when I ask you, what would you say to a mom who has maybe had a bunch of hospital births and thinks, well, I've always done it this way. Why would I have a home birth? Or how could I have a home birth? Do you have anything you would want to say to a mom like that?
I think that you don't know how strong you are until you put yourself in the position to need that strength. I leaned in the beginning of my pregnancy, I really sort of started to run from the Lord in that anger of being pregnant. And when I allowed myself to work through that, I leaned so heavily on the Lord that it didn't take anything from me to go through what I went through. And the strength that I had to do that, it was so life-giving to know that I was capable of doing this, that the Lord made me to do exactly this thing. And I didn't need, the comfort, air quotes, comfort of, an epidural or, all of the interventions and the things that kind of come with that hospital, because the Lord specifically designed me to go through exactly what I went through and to bring the baby exactly the way he planned it. And I mean, it gave me a level of not only redemption, I think, but like a new level of respect for myself, I think.
Yeah.
Because I had only had those very intervened births, whether it was in the induction or with the C-sections. There's so many things that I did not have in my control, that to be able to take everything back and to have the amazing results from it, I cannot imagine that. It's so freeing and so like liberating in such a good way. Which I never would have gotten in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
You lean so heavily on the interventions, and even if you have a natural delivery at the hospital, there's so much there that you still have with the nurses and all the the techs who come in and all of that. So to just know that it was just me and my husband and the Lord was, I mean, indescribable, honestly.
Definitely something worth taking a risk to go after, it seems like. And you did have to take a risk. You had to jump off a deep end into something completely unknown for your 8th time. But that risk, taking that risk and jumping off that into that deep end, really, really has been such a gift to you that the Lord has used in some significant ways in your life and your person and your family and your marriage.
Yes.
Bless
Amen.
him. He's so good.
Amen.
All right. Well, okay. Anything else that you feel like you would be regretful if you didn't say while you were on this podcast?
I think just trust yourself and trust the Lord, because you can do powerful things when you have a powerful God.
Amen. That's a mic drop. So let me ask you to pray for our listeners before we say goodbye.
Dear Lord, I do not know who is listening to this podcast, but you do. And you know that whether this mother is having their first baby or their 10th baby, that you have something special for them, and you are the strength that they are looking for, God. And I am so thankful that you have given me this opportunity to share a testimony with someone. And I just pray that even if there is one mother listening to this, questioning whether or not she's making the right choices, that you would just bless her with peace, God, and that you would show her that the strength that she needs, she already has, because you have given it to her. And I am so thankful that you have given me this blessing, and that I am now able to share this blessing with even just one mother, God. Thank you so much for everything that you have done in our lives and everything that you have planned for our future. And in your mighty, mighty name, God, I pray. Thank you, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Holy Wild Birth. We hope that you were genuinely encouraged, inspired, and challenged by what you heard today. If you're loving what you hear, please make sure that you share it. Leave reviews. That helps other mamas find this content as well. And don't forget to read the show notes, okay? Because that's where you can find our email address if you want to reach out to us and start a conversation. It's also where you'll find free offerings as well as invitations to work with me and or Lauren. We can't wait to get to know you. See you next week.